Good afternoon, everyone who's joined us. Can you just, hopefully you can hear me okay. If you can, just indicate in the chat box. But I think I've done a wee sound check and things seem to be going okay with sound and all the rest of it. So let's launch into it. Welcome, thanks for joining us after what has probably been a very busy day for you at school. This evening we're going to be looking at developing literacy and English through digital learning in secondary schools. My name's Helen Fairley. I am one of the Senior Education Officers for Literacy and English at Education Scotland, and I'm here today with my colleague George Billiken, who works in our digital team. My colleague Julie Jameson is also with us, and she's going to be keeping an eye on the chat box and feeding links in as we go along. And Paul Morgan will also be joining us today. He is the other Senior Education Officer, also Literacy in English. So just to kick off, we'll start off by just giving you a bit of an overview of what to expect over the 3 sessions. We're running 3 sessions for secondary and 3 sessions for literacy, for primary, sorry, excuse me. And what we'll look at is we will have a bit of an emphasis on some key messages, some considerations from what the research evidence is telling us about literacy learning in a digital environment. But I think the most important thing probably for all of you is to see that demonstration, that practical stuff around about selected digital tools which can support effective pedagogy in literacy and English. We know that we have more to share with you in terms of tools than we have time for within today's session, and so we will be signposting. I can tell you that George has put together a quite comprehensive playlist on YouTube with short videos just doing that practical stuff. So anything that you see today and you feel like you might have missed a little bit of it, don't worry, because you will be able to watch this webinar itself back, because we're recording today, but you'll also be able to find the bite-sized chunks within the playlist. Looking ahead to the further sessions, we've got one on the 19th of November, one on the 2nd of December. We will have a couple of guest practitioners, English teachers of English, coming in to see us and work with us and do a little bit of a demo of how G Suite and Microsoft Teams can be used to support an English class specifically. And in the 3rd session, and in all sessions, we're going to give you the opportunity to network with colleagues, but the 3rd session will be working in a kind of campfire creative conversation format, which is your chance to share what you've been doing, what you've been practicing in your own time, and get tips from your peers. Moving on to the next slide. So today, just pulling out of over the 3, we'll be focusing on very much on the demonstration, the practical stuff, weaving in and out of a bit of research and underpinning those demonstrations with some evidence and some considerations for yourselves, and also signposting through the playlist that I mentioned. So next slide. This has got bullets coming up. This is just a wee word about the learning community that we're setting up here today. So within literacy, we have been collaborating extensively with George. We've been working together really well. It's been a learning curve for us, certainly. But we have very much been bringing our expertise in literacy and English to the table, and George has met that with his own expertise within digital tools. You also are part of that collaboration, and so throughout 3 sessions, starting from right now, think about how you can share your own knowledge, experience and expertise. I know that within our audience today we'll have people with varying levels of confidence in working within a digital environment. Some people will maybe know more about tools that we haven't even looked at yet, while others will be really grateful for the demonstrations that were given within some basics today. So how can you contribute? Through the chat box, and we'll invite you to do that at different points through this session. Please share to our team as well. We're all part of that the Microsoft team that we're on today. You can also post to the blog on DigiLearn Scott, and we'll give you information about how you can do that too. And then moving on to the next slide. So before we move on to this question, just a bit about what's coming up next. So we will feature practical demonstrations, and that will be over to George in a second. And he's going to go from where the big emphasis will be on reading today. He's going to go from looking at supporting accessibility, reading accessibility, moving through reading comprehension, and also looking a wee bit about at reading for understanding, analysis and evaluation. We will touch upon writing too today, hopefully, if we have a bit of time at the end. So the way that session is going to run is we'll do a bit of practical stuff and we'll break away to include a little bit of commentary about what the research evidence is telling us or to talk about pedagogy. So I'm going to hand over to George. He's going to take you to the practical stuff, but first of all, he's going to say a few words just about that relationship between digital learning and effective pedagogy. Over to you, George.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. Yes, you know, I actually saw somebody just before I came on the webinar asking on Twitter about where digital learning and teaching sat in regards to across the curriculum for all learners, and although it's not explicitly stated the way that literacy is, it is right through the Higgios, if I'm right, it's 2.2 if I remember off the top of my head there, but it does talk a lot about everyone having that responsibility to use digital. But what we found in the digital team is it's so important to have that context for learning, that to show you some of the tools for the sake of showing you the tools doesn't always make it relevant to yourself. And you know, if I showed you some great examples of using Teams that geography teachers have done, that might not, it just might not paint the picture that's required. And so that's why it's been, Helen said, an education for themselves, but for me to also come in and work with my literacy and English colleagues and to really be able to think about how to use these digital tools to meet the needs of a particular group of practitioners, and particularly yourselves in English. So I'm hoping that they are relevant, and again, what would be great to see is, as Helen says, going forward, is sharing some of those examples that you use with your own learners, with the opportunities it will give you. So I guess to start then is that big question, why, and you know, thinking about why is it so important. Hopefully I've painted some of the picture with the fact that it's mentioned in our supporting documents, but I think also the current context around COVID has made it even more apparent than ever that we need learners to be able to access learning remotely and to work collaboratively online. So that's some of the, that's hopefully made that really aware for people right now. So we've got some statements here from the Education Endowment Foundation regarding why digital technology should be used to support learning and teaching. So I'm going to give you a moment to have a look at those. But I'm wondering, just as you read through them, are there any statements in particular that strike a chord for you? Anything that's surprising about that or reassuring? Is there anything that perhaps challenges your own thinking? So take a moment to have a read through those. We've shared the link that you can look back on the full report in your own time once you've got access to the slides. But if you want to have a wee think about that and post any comments into the chat.
So we're asking, is there anything, are any of these statements striking a chord? Anything surprising? Anything challenging? Anything reassuring? Mr. McCarthy's kicked us off. Just going to wait for a few more moments. Point number 2 is true. Absolutely.
I like that someone's agreed with Mr. McCarthy, but
has anyone, I suppose it's supplementary, has anyone found that new technology has supported pupils to work harder for longer or more efficiently? I mean, that's the gold, really. That's what we want. More answers coming in. Mr. Purvis, definitely agree with 5. It's exciting to have all the new technology, but it can be so overwhelming without time and training. Yep. Hopefully we're going to support you there.
Absolutely, and I think that's a point with the evaluation at the end. It's so important that you feed back to us on that and let us know that if there are sessions that, again, if I can support with any digital in relation to the English as well, to make sure that you can almost kind of double up on some of that training.
2 and 3 are linked. We've had so many issues around consistent access to technology. Okay, Miss Houston, quite an honest answer there. Without time to learn how to adapt to a new interface, it's overwhelming. Hopefully the content that we've got, not just in the webinar today, but within the playlist, will be really helpful to you.
If I can just point towards, I'm thinking in relation to some of these answers. As I said, we've delivered in the digital learning and teaching team previous webinars that you may or may not have seen that cover the use of lots of different apps within Office 365 and the Google Classroom and G Suite. Again, context free, so it might be that you've perhaps not felt it was relevant or spoke particularly to your area of learning, so that's something again we can adapt, but there are some examples on there that might be worth having a look at and seeing where they fit for yourself. We've also got the Learning Paths page here, and just as well, the website I'm at, it's got the long URL at the top, but digilearn.scot will take you straight to it. Under Learning Paths, there are some papers here around for useful resources, and you'll see some others here around, perhaps how to design and deliver flipped learning, how to make your digital learning more active and engaging for learners. So there's quite a bit from our team, as I say, just without the context perhaps of English. So it'd be great to have any feedback on those resources from yourselves and what we might need to add or change to that. And as Helen said at the start, we're hoping to add to the playlist that we've started for tonight with examples of how to use them, particularly in the English classroom. So hopefully some of these will help you with the getting started. As I say, if I can just show quickly for Teams, under our learning paths, if you go to Teams, you will see a breakdown. There are webinars all about Teams. There is this thing link image that will show you all the different parts and what each button does. So if you're not sure what the grades button leads to, there's a YouTube video that explains just that part of it, so you don't have to watch the whole webinar. And again, all of our Teams videos about Teams are broken down into each part of Teams is broken into a small video, so a few minutes long each. Just if there's particular parts you're unsure about. Someone mentioned Insights, and if you're not sure about Insights, there's a video there just about using the Insights tab, so hopefully those help.
Thank you. Just to kind of to round up this bit with the statements, a key message from everything we're doing throughout the 3 sessions and the 3 sessions with primary is that anything that we demonstrate with digital technology and literacy in English, it's inextricable from good pedagogy from us. So pedagogy comes first is one of our key messages. And with that, over to you, George, just to talk about cyber resilience and then move to the practical stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah, just a point again from the digital learning and teaching part, as we say that it's quite easy for teachers to think that maybe it's the computing department's job to teach internet safety, or it's something very often we see it happens at certain times during the year, but we would love to see it embedded, and it's a constant message that we're giving out to young people. And again, I would always put it in the context of the Green Cross Code. We talk endlessly to young people about being safe when they cross the road, and the chances are they maybe even access more online materials and platforms than they do Crossroads. Yet we don't always have those messages front and centre. So I would always ask as well, that before you ask your learners to go and use online tools such as those within Glow or Teams, that you're thinking about, well, where am I speaking to my learners about staying safe, and how do we resolve any issues around that as well. So if something does happen when they're using Teams, again, you're the teacher that's asked them to go and use that online platform, so there's an element of responsibility. So please do, again, keep an eye on our website and things and see if there's anything there about internet safety and cyber resilience. But if you could just have a wee think about that when you are planning your learning as well. If my slides will work. We go, just catching up. I'm going to make the point about, I know we spoke about using Office 365 and G Suite. For this particular one, we'll be focusing on Office primarily because those tools are available to everybody in every local authority across Scotland, and the Google G Suite tools are available by request by your local authority. Also, some of the tools that we're going to talk about are built into the Office 365, but there are perhaps similar options that work with G Suite, and I'll point those out, but I can't demonstrate them because they come from third parties. So the likes of Read and Write with Google, if you're familiar with that. And again, if there's any questions, I can cover those and maybe do some videos around the Google stuff. But G Suite only works online. It's a completely online package, but Office 365, there is a downloadable version. So again, just particularly at this time of year, coming up towards Christmas, lots of learners might be getting access to new devices, and PC World and the like will charge, I think it's about £100 a year to have Office 365 on your own device. But through Glow, everyone who has access to Glow gets access to free copies of that software. So if your learners do have problems with bandwidth, perhaps they live in an area with poor mobile signal, or they're not getting access to broadband currently, they might not have the internet access at home. One of the ways we've seen that is bringing a device into school, using the school Wi-Fi or the library Wi-Fi to download Office to their laptop, and then they're able to use that device to use Office 365, and then it's perhaps using a pen drive to bring that learning back into school. But if they do have internet access, all of that will sync up. As you can see, up to 16 devices. So your learner can have it on their mobile, their tablet, their iPad, I think even their PlayStation and Xbox now, laptop, PC. And if you are doing the work on your mobile phone, as soon as you log on to that same file on your laptop, you'll see right where you left off. So really useful for learners, again, going between classroom and home, and perhaps environments like the library. That account's all linked, and they can take pieces of learning from place to place without having to actually carry it around with them. So really useful, that. And again, it's free, and it's worth just reminding all your learners that they have access to that. That's the tile on the screen, and they can access that through Glow. So the first one I want to demonstrate then is, for me, I think it starts with the accessibility. So before our learners, before we even get to reading comprehension, have to be able to access the task. And I'm hoping that I'm showing you something that you've seen before with Immersive Reader, but just in case you haven't, just to show you that tool very quickly. So Immersive Readers, it's built right through a whole load of the Office 365 platforms, but if I can show you within Word, let's find the, where have my crocodiles gone? And there's my text there. So I have this text on my screen here, and it's part of Word, and this is the online version of Word. So through my Windows browser, it will look differently if you're using an iPad, a tablet, whether it's a laptop or a mobile phone. The versions look slightly different. I'm using the online version, but most of the features are there throughout them. So if I go up to View an Immersive Reader, what it's going to do is strip everything else off the page there, and it's only going to have the text. And the first part, the most important, is that I'm able to have that read to me.
No, the not so big one said. What? The enormous crocodile.
Crocodile grinned, showing and reads of
So Again, for learners that might have difficulty accessing a text, this makes it really straightforward. You can have the text read to them, but it might even be for it might be a learning preference rather than a learning need, that learners just wish to have it read to them for ease. There's some options in there. You saw about the speed and the voice, whether it's male or female. I can change the text size, and what's really handy about it is that if I need that text bigger for me to read it easily, it might even be just because I'm accessing it on my mobile phone, I can change the text size in Immersive Reader. But whenever I exit Immersive Reader, that formatting goes away. It's not permanent, so it means that the actual document isn't changed. You don't have to go about changing size of text between the way they work on it and the way they hand it in, for example. So Immersive Reader lets me change that. Easier for my learners to look at. There's some options about fonts. I can change the colour of the screen. So again, perhaps you might have learners, I had some in my class with visual stress, and had to carry that plastic Perspex sheet around with them to overlay their text, but they can do that built in. And again, it might not be a need, it might just be a preference for your learner, that is easy to look at for a long time with the kind of paper background rather than white. And whenever you change these settings, Immersive Reader remembers it across Office 365. So if this is the colour that I like it, anytime I open a document, Immersive Reader will open with these settings with that colour. Another bit that could be really useful, again, for unfamiliar vocabulary, is we can break it down into syllables. We can turn the syllables on and off, and again, the parts of speech. So if a learner is creating a piece of writing in Word and they turn on Immersive Reader, you can ask them to go and check whether they have used enough adjectives or adverbs, so you can turn it on. There's obviously the caveat that you need to make sure that they understand some words can be either depending on the context. So again, a computer doesn't solve everything for them, but it might just help them to go and do a wee bit of self-check on their writing and realise that they maybe haven't used enough adjectives, they need to go add some more in. Or if they were writing a non-fiction text such as a report, they might want to remove words like nice and juicy, so they're just referring to a child because that's what the text requires. And again, perhaps it's secondary, it might be something in fact that it starts turned on, but you might want to turn it off. It will show you these pictures to explain what the word is. So maybe with older learners or more confident readers, they don't want these images on, it might look a bit babyish, they can turn that off just in case that stops someone using it. But it might be especially useful for someone who is an EAL pupil. So again, it might be English as their second language and they just come across a word that is unfamiliar to them, such as enormous. And what you can see as well, I've got some options here to translate, so I can either change the whole document to, I've chosen Arabic, and it will change the whole document as much as it can, or just by word. So if I select a word, I can hear it read to me in English,
lunch,
or in Arabic.
Bam.
So it might even just be about letting learners access that text. If you can share it in Word or Teams, they can use Immersive Reader and access that text as much as possible. It just removes some of those barriers. And again, when they come finished with it, all the formatting leaves the page. The last wee part you'll notice here is it's got this picture of my web page here at the top. And what I've used for this, it's a bit tricky to demo it live, but I will put up a video on the playlist about using the Office Lens app. That's something again for learners, I think, of all abilities. Certainly those that maybe struggle with reading, it could be an absolute godsend to them. But if you use Office Lens on a mobile device, you can take a photograph. So this is a photograph I've taken with my iPad. The Lens app is synced up to my OneDrive on my computer or on my cloud here. And when I have taken the photograph, I can use Immersive Reader in the app to have it read to me, which is useful. But also in terms of the note taking that we might look at next, I've taken a photograph of this page online, and without me having to do anything, when I tell Lens to turn it into a Word document, it automatically creates the text from the image. So it looks at the image and it lifts the text and it's created as a text document that I can then go and edit or use Immersive Reader on. So Immersive Reader wouldn't read the image on my computer, it will on my device, my mobile device, but it means I can load it into a text document and edit it, and that could be really useful. I'm thinking if you had a textbook with lots of reading on there. It might be really helpful for a learner to be able to take a picture with lens and then have that read to them by the device, or to look at a textbook or a piece of paper, photograph it with their mobile device, load it into their OneDrive, and then when they're at home they could use their laptop to access and edit the text if required on their say laptop or PC, something that's maybe more useful than a mobile phone. So that's Immersive Reader and Office Lens.
Thanks so much. Okay. Before we move through to the next practical tool, if you've got your mic on, would you mind muting? Because I can hear a little bit of an echo in me. Sorry about that. That's better. Before we move on to, thanks for talking us through some tools that kind of help us with that accessibility. Before we move on to looking more closely at comprehension, I just wanted to kind of pause for us to consider some key messages from sort of research evidence that's emerging at the moment. You're probably familiar, you may be familiar with Alex Quigley. Alex Quigley, very current at the moment, published a book called How to Closing the Vocabulary Gap. His most recent publication is Closing the Reading Gap. He works with the Education Endowment Foundation, and we mentioned the EEF just at the beginning of the session today. And we're going to share, we've shared a link to a video. This is just a really quick 10-minute video, and it's Alex Quigley looking at the kind of relative benefits of on-screen reading, audiobook reading in comparison to working with the real text. And what's really interesting about this is it's not a simple message of real text good, on-screen reading bad, for example, but he is very kind of nuanced in what he says about what the benefits and the unique drawbacks are. So just taking a wee moment to look at that with you. So what it is, it's an overview of some research evidence related to screen reading and audiobooks. I'm not going to go into the audiobooks a bit at the moment. I'm going to just stick to the reading on screen bit. But what comes out of it is, first of all, a really key message, which is a message that we know is familiar to us anyway, is that every text that we set could be mediated in some way by the teacher. But when we found ourselves in the circumstances of lockdown, we were very quickly thrown out of classrooms and learning was done remotely. It's fair to say that when we set work for our students, quite a lot of their reading would have to be done on screen. And Alex Quigley talks about, he uses this example of his son's homework. His son was set homework to have a look at the Reign of Terror in the French Revolution. And you can barely see those images on your screen there, but he shows a kind of Ducksters primary school, very kind of brightly coloured formatted page alongside a Wikipedia page. And he talks about the fact that when his son attempted to do this homework using the Wikipedia page, all he did was take whole swathes, chunks of text, copied and pasted it in a document and said, homework done. And so this is a situation I know we're all going to be familiar with. This is the kind of reality, and this is what happens. But what he says is what the evidence tells us is that for whatever reason, and I don't think the reasons are known, a reading comprehension when it comes to fiction is okay compared with a real text, between screen reading and a real text, but with non-fiction, young people, learners, in fact probably all of us, find it quite difficult, and there could be any number of reasons for that. So basically comprehension dips. So what's really interesting about his conclusions in the last part of this video is that he then goes on to suggest how we mitigate, and that's what we want to talk about today. So he talks a lot about teaching young people to be strategic readers And that's what we aspire to do anyway, but probably even more important, a situation where our young people may find themselves away from school for periods of time because of self-isolating, because of illness and all the rest of it, and work continuing to be a lot of the reading being on-screen reading. So what we're going to move into is looking at what tools do we have to support that strategic reading. So George is going to talk a wee bit about OneNote, and then he's going to hand back to me, and I'm going to flag up a resource that we have within our Education Scotland resources that might also be helpful within that context. So over to you, Richard.
Thank you, and I think just to acknowledge, I think it's Mrs McFadden, if I'm right, in the comments there, saying that just to be mindful of different authorities having different access rights, and absolutely aware of that, but the from our point of view, all I can do is point what could be possible with Glow, and if there are parts that don't work or are not available, then that's worth getting in touch with your Glow key contact and asking about how to make something available that perhaps isn't. With regard, to Immersive Reader, I says I would talk about the Google Parallel. If you're using G Suite, the chances are that if your authorities opted for that over Office 365, you can still use Office 365 through Glow, but if you are using G Suite, then it's most likely the read-write Chrome extension, so you would need to have it's most often read and write, others are available, but the read-write app or Chrome extension added to your Chrome browser, and that will do that screen reading part for you. Alternatively as well, if I could just show with that one too, if you are using the Edge browser, regardless of what software you've got on the screen, if you're using the new Edge browser, up in the ellipsis for options, there is an option to read aloud, and it will read anything on the screen for you. So you've got that built into your new Microsoft Edge browser if you have it. If you're using Chrome, you'll need an extension to do that. And if you're using an iPad, it has a screen reading built into it as well, so it'll read anything on the screen to you. So just to make sure that people are getting that across different platforms there. One of the ones you can do, and what I'd like to demonstrate for this next one, is anything you have in Word Online, there's an option to open in the desktop app, and the desktop app has just some more options than you would find in the online version. Again, can't do that with Google Docs because there isn't an offline version of Google Docs, they don't have a desktop version, so the Google Docs you are accessing through Glow or whatever platform is the full version of Google Docs. But if I open it up in the desktop version here, you'll see there's a lot more going on at the top of the screen. So I've got a slightly different text here for this example, but one of the options I have, if I go to review, I've got this option you'll hopefully recognise as a OneNote, and what I've done previously is I've already got an English notebook where I take my notes, and I created a page in there for this text. So the text is called Bingo Bella, it's a song by Matt McGinn, and if I need to take any notes, what it does is it brings it up on my Windows device here, so it's something that learners might be using more likely at home. But again, a strategy worth showing them so that they can use that when they're working independently. It might be, again, I'm aware a lot of local authorities have had money released from the government to buy devices, so it might be that you're finding more and more of your learners have devices, and that's something to consider about how they use those devices in school. But again, that's up to your school and your local authority about access. So what you can see is I've got a OneNote document here, which is like my virtual notepad, and I can just start to type away. So if I'm maybe going to have a look at this and say, what might the story be about, or what's the song about, and I want to make some notes under that heading. It's two ladies going to talking about going to the bingo. I might want to have a think about the events, what's happening in that. So if I'm just taking some notes under headings here, as I'm reading the text on the screen, as Helen says, talking about those strategies to encourage my learner to think about what they're reading, they can go through and make notes here. And the beauty is, if you're familiar with OneNote, when I open up the full document, there we go, there's my draw button hidden. What I can start to do is, if I want to make notes with my finger, so I could write it, I could draw a mind map, and that might just be more conducive to your learners. So we're going to go from the song at the centre, we want to talk about the characters, and it might be that making a mind map is something more useful to your learners. They might want to talk about things like repetition in there. I've gone off the page. So if your learners are more visual and they want to write, or you want them to create something like a mind map, they can do that using the OneNote, or they can use it with text. And again, once I've reduced that back down, if I go back to my Word document, it means I'm never needing to edit the Word, but I can use those linked notes, and I can then, as you saw, open it up in OneNote as a separate document and just look at those notes that I've made and transfer them to different devices as I need to. So you can see again there, if I've drawn any examples on there, I can scroll through that as I need to. I can have it just slightly different sizes as required. So it's really handy that it links, and it now recognises that this document, the planning document I've got here, my notes, are linked to this. So if I tell it to open up my notes, it's going to open up that same OneNote page again, but that's done on the desktop version of Word. I think, is that back to yourself for the...
Thank you, yeah. Yeah, thanks for that, George. And I think what I would add, from my own point of view, if I had an English class, or indeed if I had any class, social studies, sciences, the ability, I think what I really like about that tool is that OneNote docks to the screen, to the desktop. It doesn't move around, you can't lose it, so you're not trying to kind of swim. There's that cognitive load of trying to move boxes around the screen and make them stay in the same place or make them match each other. It just sits there beautifully, and it's immovable, and you can scroll your other document up and down. So say you're not working with, you're working with the song today, but say you were working with, if you're working in English, you were maybe working on a 2-page text that was a bit of background information on the author, or about the context that your novel is set in. You're reading The Great Gatsby and you're looking at a text about the Roaring Twenties, for example, then you can make your notes directly beside where it is in the text. You can scroll your text up and down. What I also wanted to kind of, on that note, show you and raise your awareness of a wee resource that's within our own reading resources at Education Scotland. So coming back to that idea of reading strategies and strategic readers, this is just a really kind of simple before, during, after, some tasks that you can model for your learners, that you can put together, that you can set for them to do. It really sort of helps them to engage fully and comprehend fully any text that they're working with. So for example, making predictions is there in the before, making connections with prior knowledge as you go along, some things to do afterwards, summarising the content, and doing that like doing that in your own way. That could be through drawing pictures, and as you can see from that demonstration, the capability is within OneNote for you to do that, doing a mixture of pictures and words. And I suppose I'm flagging this up just to help you consider, not just the fact that you can set that wee notepad up and dock it to your desktop, but you as a teacher and as a mediator of the text, you could scaffold that even more by possibly using some of these little tasks as headings and use as many or as few as you feel are appropriate. So as I say, that resource is there, and it's just really to kind of support that thinking of how we help our readers, whatever their level of experience, to become more strategic readers, and particularly more strategic readers of text on screen, although you could apply this to real text too, of course. So that was just to flag that up for you. Moving on, the next wee sort of demonstration then, that it's within OneNote as well, is within more the sort of English literature element. And so George is going to show you a little bit more a few more aspects of OneNote that might be of interest to you. If you were saying you were working with a text like the song lyrics of Bingo Bella, for example. So pass over to you again, George, now. Show you.
So again, the advantages with using OneNote for that is you can see here if you're not familiar with OneNote, and it might be Class Notebook you've used in Teams, which is a OneNote in Teams. I've got my section here, so again, different parts of my folder are effectively different jotters, if you like, and then you've got the pages within each section. So I could have multiple subjects or topics that we're working on, and each one has its own set of pages which are distinct. So if I created a new section, you'll see the pages disappear, and I can add the pages to them. But when I'm working on this particular text, so those are my notes that were linked to my Word document earlier. In this page here, what I've done is I've used insert file and a PDF, and when I put a PDF in, what's really handy is it doesn't treat it as text, it treats it just as an image there. So if we were going to have a look at analysing it and perhaps looking at any repetition through the text, again, if it was text, such as a Word document, I've got my highlight option built in, but that won't let me do it because it's not treating it as text. But again, if I go to draw, I do have a highlighter, so I can have a look about, I know the phrase, the snowball comes up regularly through that. If I'm having a look through my text, I can keep seeing that it keeps talking about this snowball at the bingo. So that might be something I want to have a look into to find if I've got the prior understanding of that, or whether or not it's something I have to go and find out about. So I've got the mention of the snowball a few times. So there was a third example, I'm sure. It might be again going in with a different coloured pen there and bringing out any, so it's written in Scots there, so Glaswegian dialect in particular, and you might have, you want to pick out words that perhaps aren't in English. If that's what you're looking to analyse, that's whatever you're looking to do in that text. You can go with the different colours, you can annotate it, as Helen said, and that might be something that you're doing already in your classroom, but you might be reluctant to do it or unable to do it if you've got learners that are working from home. If it's a mixed delivery, you might have learners in their own home or in different rooms in the school. I know some schools that perhaps had pupils going from different settings for such an advanced hire might not be able to do that now, so working tools like this are going to support that. The beauty is with that, in the first bit we can start to analyse it and highlight it. I can also draw in the text as well, so if there's an area here, I could say this is effectively the first, it's not quite verses and chorus, but this is effectively my first verse of the song up to that point. And if I scroll through, I can annotate the text, or I could bring something out and say, is this the main character? Is it the is this someone we want to look at in the story? So I'm able to write and annotate on that. But you'll see there the share button, and that's something I think we'll put into a video to just demonstrate that. But it could be that learners are then able to work on the same document. So I could give Helen permission to work on this at the same time as me. So we could be working on the one document and highlighting different parts or adding different notes for each other. And that could be something you have to do, as I say, if someone's working from home in a mixed delivery setting and some learners are in class and you want to include them, or it could just be for something that they're working on in their own time and you want them to be able to collaborate, but because of social distancing they're perhaps not allowed to go and visit each other or sit in a library and work together on that, so they can do it remotely. So by sharing the document, learners can give someone else access to it, share them the link, and then that collaborator can come on and work on the document at the same time as them. Again, the equivalent to that with Google would be Jamboard, and it doesn't lend itself quite so well, I wouldn't say, to an extended text, because it's the screen doesn't scroll on it, so you can't add more and more down the way, but you can certainly add an image of a text to it, and you could analyse it and share ideas on it. It's got wee sticky pads which are useful as well, but OneNote I think is really useful for that. One of the examples that we also spoke about is how you could take that further. So again, if you had learners working on a text collaboratively, and again because of either social distancing or absenteeism, or no absentees, they're perhaps isolating at home, and it's mixed delivery. If you're doing that through Teams, then if I open up this team, if you're doing that through Teams in your PLC notebook, and again it's exact same, it's just a OneNote within Teams, but the beauty is, again, depending on your school and your local authority access, I'm pretty sure there will be guidance now from each local authority, that they have the option, as we are, to have a video call, so your learners could perhaps be collaborating on a document together, but discussing it through video, so they could still be having that group discussion to go along with the text and the highlighting and the annotation that they're doing. Again, different ways of doing that with different apps. I say, whether it's Google, it's probably going to be Jamboard that you want to have a look at, and if you're using an Apple device, the Word and OneNote apps are both available through your iPad, but the Word on your iPad will let you annotate as well, so you might not have to be OneNote, but OneNote I think lends itself very much to working with, example there, a PDF as your text, and you're then able to go and annotate and mark it up. And the beauty with that is your learners can't edit that text, so they can't delete bits by mistake or change the order of the writing for others, so that's quite useful. If that was a Word document, there'd be words moving all over the place. And the last wee part as well you might want to consider is the use of voice notes with that. So when the learners are making notes, again, whether it's just a preference or it might help with an additional support need, if they go up to insert and audio, I think the songwriter is talking about a particular era in Glasgow, and two probably older ladies going to play bingo, and they can take those notes that might support their thinking as well. So that's another tool that you could use that's built into OneNote too. They can make their voice notes, or as the teacher you might want to leave that verbal feedback for them.
That's fantastic to see that, and I think I kind of want to sit and look at Bingo Bella a bit closer now and try and pull out. I'm noticing some imagery around about the weather. I'm wondering what the relationship is between the speaker and Bingo Bella. Anyway, we're not here to go into all of that just now, but I can imagine, for example, preparation for the assessment of Scottish text, for example, and working with a selected extract, the mileage that you could get in allowing pupils to interact so directly with the text like that, and to collaborate on it, and to record their thoughts, their discussions around about it, to come back to later, makes the tool really, really powerful to me as an English teacher. So hopefully the folks tuning in today have found that quite helpful. So we've really been focusing on reading, and we've moved from accessibility, we've looked at comprehension, we're looking there a wee bit of reading for understanding, analysis and evaluation. We've got 10 minutes remaining, George. Do you want to do a little taster around about the voice typing before we let people go?
Yep.
That
will just take a couple of minutes. If I can also show, sorry, just before we leave, one note I meant to say, if you're using this online version, under View there is an option to show authors, and anything that's typed, so it's not showing it for things that are written, but if there's anything that I had typed, such as my notes on this page, it will show you here that it was George who put this text on the page. So that could be really useful if it is a collaborative document and you want to know just how much work each learner has put into that text. And again, that might be that it was George taking notes, that was his role, so that's why it's got George's name beside it. But you might want to, I know that might be something around evidence, where it looks like one learner's contributed a lot more than another. Yeah, with the voice typing, again, I think just in terms of accessibility, and I know it's certainly that writing stamina is still something that's very much a consideration. If you've got to write an extended text, learners should absolutely still be able to write an extended text. However, if they do have whether again, I'm always thinking in terms of support needs, but it might just be, I'm thinking even as the teacher, and you've got quite a bit of writing to do, let's say report cards, you have the option in Word, if you open up a new online Word document, you've got the microphone at the top right corner, and as you speak to the computer, it will type your words on the screen. Obviously, the more you enunciate the words and more deliberately that you speak, you'll see it can be very accurate. However, if I start to speak a lot more quickly, it does drop off a little bit in terms of accuracy, but it looks like it is keeping up pretty well there. Full stop. There we go. And you'll see that it even understands, that didn't work in the primary example, but you can even use grammatical instructions there, so put full stop or new paragraph. And it will change the text. It does the exact same thing in Google Docs as well. It has a dictate tool built in, and you can type with your voice. And I'm just thinking for lots of learners that could very much be the difference between putting a few sentences on a page to putting a few paragraphs, or again, if it's even at an initial draft stage, as Helen said, with a OneNote and making voice notes, it might just be useful enough for your learners to be able to speak to the screen, put a lot of text down and then go back, and you can see here it is highlighting bits that I might want to check, and I can go back and add in punctuation or capital letters or anything else that might require. So for me, that could be the difference between a learner getting started on a piece of writing and not being able to even start, and finding that challenging in itself. So straight away I can create a whole page of text really easily, and that might just be enough to increase my confidence to really get me engaging with that learning, and to again perhaps even improve the attainment there, that I can actually now assess a piece of writing that's lengthier than it was. So that's dictate, and you've even got options under dictate. If I'm writing settings, you can choose the spoken language, so that again, if a learner spoke in a different language, they could, if they had to write it in French, they could. If I was a French learner, they could speak in French, capture that, and then use the translate option to translate the document to English if that's what that was required to get them. All of those tools are built in as part of Word Online, so there's absolutely loads happening there to support your learners, whatever their needs. The last wee part, just before I hand back to my literacy colleagues, I would ask as well, on our DigiLearn Scott site, there is a page to get involved, and what we'd love to get. Got loads of examples during lockdown. We've had quite a lot more coming in since, but it would be great to have examples from our colleagues in an English setting. So there's an option here to fill out a short form, give us an idea about what you've been doing, and let us create a blog post from that. And it would be great if we could get some more English teachers contributing to that with examples of how they're using digital learning and teaching to support their English classes. That would just help your colleagues as well. That was part of the options to get involved that Helen mentioned at the start, so that's where that sits on DigiLearn Scott. And also, last wee part is, you might well, if you're already embedded in digital learning teaching in your school, or you've thought about the Digital Schools Award already, the two go hand in hand. It might well, doesn't have to be again someone teaching computing or business studies that's going to lead the Digital Schools Award. I know one of my friends, a history teacher, and he has led it for his school. So it might well be that already some English teachers amongst you are have already led the Digital Schools Award at your school. But if you are looking to implement these strategies, then it might be worth looking at the Digital Schools Award, and you're already meeting a lot of the criteria for the work that you've done, and it might be worth going through that process and getting the recognition. But it'd be great to see people coming from an English background to contribute to that digital learning teaching community too.
Thank you. Hopefully you found some of that useful. As we say, we took you through reading and we managed to get a little bit on writing, and at the end I think George will agree that's kind of the tip of the iceberg with what we could do with Word. But again, more in the playlist, and please do let us know via your evaluations if there's anything particular that you want us to focus in, and we'll try and find the opportunity, either maybe not so much in the next session but in the last session, to get that support to you, and certainly through the playlist as well. Julie is feeding in some links into the chat for our evaluation. Be really, really grateful if you could pass on your feedback via our evaluation. And if you've got any feedback specific to your role, if you're an English teacher, support for learning, librarian, for example, anything that you're looking for, please do let us know via that evaluation too. Also, Julie's going to feed in the other links that we mentioned to Alex Quigley, to the Endowment Foundation, and most importantly, that brilliant playlist that we've put together on YouTube. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Have I missed anything, Julie, George? Have we covered it all?
I think you've covered it all, Helen.
Great. Yep. So, yeah, do let us know what you think. We look forward to seeing you again. We'll be joined by our 2 English teachers looking at how to manage an English class via G Suite and via Microsoft Teams. And otherwise, have a lovely evening.
Helen, do you just want to mention the next date?
Mention the
next date.
Yeah, it's the 19th of November is our next date. So we'll see you then.